Welcome to Mr. Biz Radio, biz talk for biz owners. If you're ready to stop faking the funk and take your business onward and upward, this show is for you. And now, here's Mr. Biz, Ken Wentworth.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Mr. Biz Radio with me, Mr. Biz, Ken Wentworth. And we have a repeat guest. We are honored to have Dr. Wiggins back with us. He did the show. We had him on a few months back, and we talked to him again about bringing and talking about more things. I know after the last show we did, after we got off the air, we were talking. It's like, man, there's so many other different things we could talk about on the subject, and reached back out to him to get him back on the show to talk about some of these things, and really kind of a part two almost to our original show, where we talked about his book series, Weeding Out the Myths About Marijuana. There's so many different things to cover about that. So that's why we have Dr. Wiggins back on. He is the author of the book series, as I mentioned, Weeding Out the Myths About Marijuana. He is a licensed physician who has been on the front lines of healthcare for almost 3 decades. He has served in many leadership roles and has personally performed general anesthetics on over 27,000 patients, including thousands of marijuana users. Dr. Wiggins, welcome back to Mr. Biz Radio.
Good to be here, Ken. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Last show was fantastic. If you guys haven't seen that, go back and check it out. Like I said, it's you'll see Dr. Wiggins, his name in the title or whatever of the show. It's like I said a few months back, but that was a fantastic show. We got a lot of good feedback on it, and that's one of the reasons why we want to have you back on. And selfishly, I wanted to have you back on because I had so many more questions to ask you. But before we dive into that, I know everyone, for the benefit of those who didn't see the first show, tell us a little bit more outside of the introduction, a little bit about your background.
My first degree was a business degree from SMU, and I thought at the time that I would go into business with my dad. He had a construction company, and he was very successful. But at the time that I graduated was 88, and it was around the construction bust of the late 80s. And he sat me down and he said, "Son, I would absolutely love to have you in business with me. But I'm starving right now, and I don't want you to starve as well. And as much as I would love to have you come here and work with me and spend time with you, I really recommend that you try something else." He said, I've been going through, booms and busts for decades now, and I would recommend trying something where that doesn't happen to you. So when I finished college, I was younger than most people when I finished, and I really, honestly, I wasn't real prepared for the business world. I tried a couple of things. I did some public relations for one firm, and then went into corporate America for a few years. And the company that I was with really liked me, and they put me in what they called their executive development program. They were fast tracking me to be an upper level executive with their company. But I saw really quickly that wasn't for me for many reasons. One of the reasons is that I would go to talk to the president of the division all the time, and he was kind of a mentor. And he had lived, I believe it was 27 different places in the 30 years that he had been with the company.
Oh, wow.
And so I thought, hey, this is not for me. So I decided, looked into several things and decided I wanted to be an oral surgeon. I went to dental school, medical school, finished my internships and residency, and I began looking into going into practice with several people, several seasoned practitioners, and there wasn't private equity money like there is today. You usually found a practice to go into, or you started your own. And I really wanted to make my own decisions. So I looked into starting my own practice, and that's what I did. And looking back, it was a great decision. And I've had a successful practice for several decades now.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. So what led you down this path to really diving into, weeding out the myths about marijuana?
Well, I became interested in the subject for several reasons. First of all, at work, about a decade ago, we began seeing people that were taking much more anesthetic to keep them asleep. In fact, it was taken about 3 to 4 times more. Studies now show that it's about 3.2 times on average for people who use marijuana versus those who don't, for the type of anesthetic that we use on a daily basis, which is a total IV anesthetic using mainly propofol. And then also, we saw that it takes about 60% more pain medication to keep people comfortable afterwards. And there's a lot more anxiety with it. That's the professional side. And then the personal side, I have several cousins who died young, and three of them were heavy marijuana users. Two of them started out with marijuana and moved on to other drugs and died young. And then one only smoked marijuana, but he did it for about 30 years, and he did it heavily, and it really harmed his heart. And he wound up dying of a heart attack, and it was determined that it was really his marijuana use that caused that. And then the last thing, kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, was a young man who is a very close relative who went to college, got in with a group of guys who were smoking marijuana. And the second time that he did it, he developed severe cannabis-induced psychosis and wound up in a psychiatric hospital. And he was never able to finish the semester, and he wasn't able to ever return to school. So I started studying the subject, and what I found really shocked me. It was not what I had thought it would be. Even as a doctor, I didn't understand all the downsides, the dangers of marijuana. And so I began speaking about it, about the things that I was finding, and then I wrote the book series.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about one of the things I think that I know we touched on a little bit during the first show, but I wanted to dive in a little bit deeper is you had mentioned a little bit about some of the potency of marijuana nowadays versus, maybe, what it was a decade or two ago. What are you seeing with that, and what do you think are the, sort of the causes of that?
If you go back to Woodstock, 1969, marijuana was generally 1% to 2% THC. THC is the chemical in marijuana that causes the high. And if you got the really good stuff at that time, it was maybe 3%. You fast forward to 1995, it's 4% to 6%. Well, today it's 22% to 23%, and that didn't happen. Yeah, that didn't happen by accident. That happened with very good selective breeding. And although they like to say that big marijuana likes to say that it's still natural, they use a lot of really clumsy genetic manipulation. They're still able to call it GMO most of the time because they're not using traditional, or they're not using the newer techniques that make it GMO. They're able to call it non-GMO, I should say. But it's really not the natural substance that it was. More, people think of it as a natural substance, and even the 1% to 2%, the 3% can cause issues. But the newer stuff, we really have to look at it as almost a completely different drug, and you can't get anything under about 15% or so today, and anything above 10% is considered high potency. And that high potency carries a 4 times risk of addiction, and it causes many more physical and mental health issues than the old stuff did.
Wow. Yeah. So we're looking at, roughly 10 times the potency of what it was back in, I guess, in my mind, kind of the heyday of marijuana smoking, like I said, back in the Woodstock days, et cetera. That's pretty crazy. Guys, we're going to hit a break here. Again, talking with Dr. Raymond Wiggins. You can find out more at his website, drwiggins.com. We'll put this in the show notes. Also follow him on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, and LinkedIn.
If you would like to reach hundreds of thousands of business owners every week, Mr. Biz Radio can help. Our show airs globally 7 days a week for more than 25 hours across several internet radio stations, plus 20 plus podcast platforms. Also, video exposure on the new exclusive Mr. Biz Network streaming channel, which gets blasted to 100 plus streaming platforms, and the Mr. Biz YouTube channel, and our 350,000 social media followers multiple times every week. Join Mr. Biz Nation as an advertiser by emailing us at info@MrBizSolutions.com.
Attention, Mr. Biz Nation. We have an exclusive offer just for you. Get lifetime access to scarcity countdown timers and logic links for only $69. Yes, you heard it right. Only $69. These tools will add urgency to your email campaigns and website pages, helping you increase conversions, sales, and capture more leads. Don't miss this incredible opportunity. Visit getpulsetools.com now and take your business to new heights.
Check out all 3 of Mr. Biz's best-selling books at MrBizBooks.com. Now, once again, here's Mr. Biz.
Welcome back to the show. We're going to dive in a little bit deeper here on some of these things. Again, this is a kind of a follow-up to our original show we did with Dr. Wiggins a few months back. But Dr. Wiggins, what are you seeing, and what have you seen with your research in this with marijuana and subject matter of some of the medical and mental impacts, the health impacts that maybe people don't understand fully, and and then they get kind of into it, immersed into it, maybe addicted to it, and then, oh my gosh, here are all these downstream impacts it's having on, again, their medical and or mental health.
I think everyone understands that there are effects on the brain, but what most people don't understand, and what I didn't really understand as a physician until I really started looking into it. There's a lot of long-term effects on your brain, your heart, your lungs, your fertility, your genetics. And if you want to look at the brain, for instance, there's impacts in really every area. It causes long-term. You're looking at increased risk of strokes and mini strokes. You're looking at decreased IQ, somewhere between 5 to 8 points, depending on the study that you look at. And that may sound like just a really small change, but the average marijuana user who uses regularly has an IQ below 70% of their peers, 71% of their peers. If you're looking at the heart, that was one of the biggest ones that really shocked me. For the first hour after you smoke marijuana, you're looking at about a 5 times risk of a heart attack, especially for young people. It's much higher because marijuana causes increases in blood pressure and heart rate, inflammation, decrease in oxygen in the blood, and increase carbon monoxide in the blood. There's problems with the lungs. One marijuana cigarette causes the same damage as about a pack of tobacco cigarettes, and you're looking at increases in not only in inflammation and lung damage, but you're also looking at increases in cancer as well. One of the things that I've been looking at recently, and I really didn't get a chance to get this in my book because there's so many new studies about this. This is a fascinating area. It's called epigenetics. And one of the things that I found is that epigenetics is the study, by the way, of inherited traits that come without changes to the DNA sequence. It's all the chemicals and things that affect our DNA, and it regulates the gene expression. Well, the incredible thing about epigenetics is that it's transgenerational. Not only does it affect you, but it affects all the way down to your great-grandchildren, down to the 4th generation.
Oh, wow.
And there's significant epigenetic alterations with marijuana. And that can lead to increases in cancers and congenital anomalies, or what we used to call birth defects, accelerated aging. And studies show that teenagers that use marijuana, both male and female, are causing devastating effects for future generations, even more so than what marijuana use in pregnancy does to unborn children in ladies, just from the inhaled smoke. So it's really a fascinating area and a very new area that we're looking at.
So is there a difference now? I know now with the legalization of marijuana in a lot of different states now, it comes in, you can get, cannabis, THC, et cetera, in a lot of different forms. Is there a difference between smoking marijuana as opposed to consuming it in some other fashion, whether it be a gummy or something like that?
The main difference, and in fact, people that ingest it as opposed to smoking it, there's a lot more issues with the amount that's consumed. You can consume a lot more. and it takes a lot longer to take effect. So what happens is with smoking marijuana, within 30 seconds or so, you're high, and it's very consistent. But when you eat a gummy or a brownie or cookie or drink a drinkable, something like that, it's extremely variable as to how long it will take to take effect. And if there's a high fat content, either in that substance or something that you've eaten recently, it can take a really long time, even up to a couple of hours. So what happens is people will eat the gummy or the brownie and they think, oh, this is not working, especially if they've smoked it before and knew the immediate effects. Mm-hmm. And then they'll eat more and maybe even do it a third time. And so that leads to a lot more ER visits from brownies and gummies than from smoking. Now with smoking, you can have the psychiatric issues that can lead to a lot of ER visits. But as far as overdose, we're talking about a lot more with ingesting.
Yeah, and I can assume that. I actually have someone who will remain nameless, who was not a marijuana smoker, decided to delve into consumables and had that exact experience, where had heard from someone who was a friend of his that it would take effect pretty quickly. And that's exactly what happened. Is he consumed, I forget what it was, a gummy or brownie or whatever it was. And his friend said, well, just start out with this, only eat a half or something. I don't know, whatever it was. And he waited, 20 minutes, half hour, nothing happened. So he ate the other half. And then, but then when it did finally kick in, he ended up having a really, really, really bad experience. And he said, I'll never touch any of that ever again. Because he's a very clean living guy. Like I said, he had never smoked marijuana in his entire life. He'll have alcoholic beverages now and again, but he's not, he's not a drug type person or whatever. And he had such a bad experience on it. He said, some of it was actually, in hindsight, was funny to hear how bad it was. I mean, obviously it wasn't funny while I was going through it, but the psychosis of it. And, he was super paranoid and thought he was going to die and, just horrendous. And he said, I will never, ever have anything to do with anything with it has THC, cannabis, anything like that in it. He goes, I don't want to even have the potential to have that experience again. It was such a bad experience for him.
When I started doing what I'm doing, when I started studying this, one of my very best friends told me about an experience he had that was exactly what you just told me and exactly what I had told you before. But he had such a bad experience. He swore that he would never touch the stuff again.
Yeah. And I said, man, it must have been pretty bad. If you were that bad, you'd say, maybe I'll try it a little bit later and I'll do it different. And he said, absolutely not. I won't do it, because he said it was just a horrendous experience. And, I guess I forget how long he said it took. He kind of slept it off once he was finally able to calm down enough to go to sleep. And he felt pretty much okay the next morning, but he still had the memories of how, horrendous the experience was. And he said, look, I'm telling you, he said, he had told his wife, he said, he kept telling her, you got to call 911. I'm going to die. And his wife said, no, you're not going to die. You're okay. And he said, no, you don't understand. He said, I was so convinced that I was going to die. And his wife was telling the story that she said, oh, he literally looked at me and he kept saying, did you call 911 yet? She said, no, I'm not going to call 911. They can't do anything for you, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, okay, well, when I'm dead, they're going to think that you killed me. I hope you're happy about that. Like, he was that paranoid and it was that bad of an experience. And again, to hear the story in hindsight was kind of funny, but obviously not in the heat of it. So guys, we're going to hit a break again here. Go to drwiggins.com to find out more.
How would you like to have direct access to Mr. Biz to help you run your business more profitably and more efficiently? At MrBizSolutions.com, you get live access to not only Mr. Biz, but also several of his hand-picked and trusted business experts, each with 20 plus years of experience to help you optimally manage and grow your business. That's just the start of where Mr. Biz Solutions begins. Learn more at MrBizSolutions.com. That's MrBizSolutions.com.
Attention, Mr. Biz Nation. We have an exclusive offer just for you. Get lifetime access to scarcity countdown timers and logic links for only $69. Yes, you heard it right. Only $69. These tools will add urgency to your email campaigns and website pages, helping you increase conversions, sales, and capture more leads. Don't miss this incredible opportunity. Visit getpulsetools.com now and take your business to new heights.
Got a question for Mr. Biz you want answered on air? Email it to info@MrBizSolutions.com. Now, once again, here's Mr. Biz.
All right, welcome back to the show. Again, talking this week with Dr. Wiggins about weeding out the myths about marijuana, his book series. So, Dr. Wiggins, we've talked about, and you've told us a lot of the bad things, right? But what about medical marijuana? So I know, actually, I'm not sure if there's anyone in my family, but I'm trying to think. I know someone who uses medical marijuana, and they swear by it. They say, "Oh my gosh, my life has changed so much for the better now that I use it." What have you seen with medical marijuana? Is it really good for you? Is it not good for you? Does it help? Does it hurt?
The first thing I want to say is I'm never here to bash anyone. You know, I'm not wanting to say that if you do this, you're the worst person in the world. But what I will say from a scientific standpoint and from a clinical standpoint, things that I've seen, it does not help. If you look at the literature, at the science, there's really nothing that it helps. It doesn't help with pain like people think it does. It doesn't help with anxiety. And in fact, all of the problems that you have with recreational marijuana, you also have eventually with medical marijuana as well. And the potency that we have today, there are no studies that show that it helps in any way. If you go back to the older, 1 to 2%, it might have helped a little bit with anxiety, but eventually you're going to develop more anxiety even with that. But today it's gonna be much quicker. So, long story short, I'm not a fan because I know that in the long run it's going to cause many more problems than it's going to help.
Well, it sounds like, at least from a scientific perspective, maybe some of those people that feel the benefits of it, it seems it would be much of a very psychosomatic type of thing, where they believe that it's going to help them and it's not really helping them, or at least, but they think it is. And so, they get that psychosomatic effect.
That's exactly the case. If you look at studies, there's a huge placebo effect, and it really works in that way, rather than through the chemicals, the THC, the CBD, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. So we talked some about medical and mental health impacts. What about one thing we didn't talk about on the first show, and we haven't talked about yet, I want to get into before we have to wrap the show up here, is sort of some of the economic and societal impacts that I think maybe get overlooked in this whole grand scheme of things.
Yeah, if you look at the social and economic impacts of marijuana, people that tout the supposed benefits of marijuana talk about the economic benefits. They talk about how safe it is, but however, there's tremendous economic and social costs. There was a study from Colorado that showed that for every tax dollar that's brought in, there's $4.50 spent to mitigate those negative effects, and most of that's due to medical care, ER visits, et cetera. And marijuana revenue really only accounts for 0.85% of Colorado's budget, and that's across the board. If you look at states that have legalized marijuana and thinking that that's going to really be a boon for their state, it's only a very small percentage of their budget. And the problem is it leads to increased violence. We think of marijuana as causing people to be mellow, but there's many studies that show that there's more interpersonal violence. There was a study of 6,000 men that used drugs, and almost all of them used almost exclusively marijuana in this study. And there was a 5-fold increase in violence. There's much more domestic violence, more dating violence. You're somewhere around 50% more likely to be a perpetrator of dating violence, and 45% more likely to have someone cause or be violent towards you whenever you're using marijuana, because you may not fight back as much. There's more organized crime. There's a lot of human trafficking, both in the legal and illegal markets. And one of the things that we really don't hear very much is there's a lot more automobile accidents. There were 9,400 automobile accidents due to marijuana in 2022, which is the last year that we have studies at this point, and somewhere around 15 million people per month, according to AAA, drive under the influence of marijuana within 1 hour after smoking it. So there's just a tremendous economic and social costs. And also one thing that you might be interested in, and your listeners might be interested in, marijuana is also linked to 75% more job absences, 55% more on-the-job accidents, 85% more injuries on the job, decreased productivity, and many more lawsuits as well. And you're 50% more likely to lose your job if you're a marijuana user compared to those who don't use marijuana. And you can't have jobs such as being in transportation, such as pilots or ship captains or bus drivers. You really shouldn't be in an emergency medical personnel or a healthcare worker. You shouldn't be in law enforcement or firefighter. There's just a lot of downsides to marijuana.
So how long does it stay in your system? I mean, I'm sure it varies, but just generally speaking.
It depends on what you're talking about. There are effects on your brain up to we think of it being about 4 hours, but really those last for about 12 hours. And there are changes in the way that you drive, for instance. There are changes even until the next day. And also, if you're talking about drug tests, it depends on the test, but it can be a few days, it can be weeks, and there can even be hair samples that can show it for much longer than that.
Yeah, and I was just thinking more so of the effects, because one of the things you mentioned that I think is so they legalized it in our state here in Ohio less than a year ago. And one of my concerns is exactly one of the things you mentioned is automobiles, as people using marijuana in some form or another and then getting behind the wheel. And you would think it'd be very obvious to people, just like if you have too many drinks that you shouldn't be driving, it's the same thing. You're driving impaired. And I'm very concerned about the increased rate. I mean, you know how much the alcohol impact is on accidents and things like that, and automobile accidents. I'm just waiting for that sort of downstream impact of that, to see that, of people, consuming marijuana in some form or another and then getting behind the wheel.
Fatal accidents in the U.S. was about 9% of those were due to marijuana in 2000. In 2018, it was 22%, and we know that it's gone up each year. I don't know the statistics at this point. They're not out at this point, but I know it's going to be more than 22%. And if you want to put that in perspective, 40% for alcohol, but many more people use alcohol than use marijuana.
Yeah, and I think that it's just going to grow, right? Because as more states legalize it, and I think people just automatically, oh well, if they legalize it, it must be okay, and not really thinking it all the way through.
That's exactly right. The states that have legalized, it greatly increases the risk of being involved in a fatal auto accident due to marijuana. It's somewhere between I believe it's 30% in states that have legalized medical marijuana and 71% higher in states that have legalized recreational marijuana.
Yeah, I believe it. Gosh, so many good things here. Again, drwiggins.com, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, and LinkedIn as well. Dr. Wiggins, thank you so much for coming on the show again.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Ken.
Yeah, good stuff. Guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a fantastic rest of your week. And don't forget, as always, cash flow is king.
To become part of Mr. Biz Nation, follow him on all social media platforms or never miss a show by going to MrBizRadio.com. If you prefer free video content, visit the Mr. Biz YouTube channel or check out his streaming channel, which is available on 100 plus streaming platforms at MrBizNetwork.com.